Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Nick Tate. Today, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz concentration camp and also mark the annual International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The Holocaust was the genocide of European Jews by Nazi Germany during the Second World War. It claimed an estimated 6 million Jews murdered. Auschwitz was most notorious for its role as a major extermination site. Over 1 million people were murdered there, either through ill treatment, disease, starvation, or in the gas chambers. Some 7,000 prisoners, too ill or weak to be evacuated, remained at Auschwitz when the camp was liberated by the Soviet troops on the 27th of January, 1945, 80 years ago today. Humanity must never forget the Holocaust, what happened and how. We must continue to challenge those who would distort or deny this past, or who would discriminate and persecute today. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Thank you. If you're able, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Abraham Kurtz. Abraham Kurtz was born on the 13th of December 1909 in Lutomiersk in central Poland. The son of Yankel Kurtz and Sura Kurtz. When the Second World War broke out, there were about 2,000 Jews living in Lutomiersk. The anti-Jewish terror began with the arrival of the Germans. The anti-Jews were kidnapped in the streets for hard and humiliating labor. Their beards were cut off and their property requisitioned. Just before the occupation, and within its first weeks, nearly 1,300 Jews escaped, and by October 1939, only 750 remained in Lutomiersk. In the summer of 1940, an open ghetto was created. A year later, it was closed off, and no one could leave without a pass. Groups of Jews were led out of the ghetto each day for hard labor. At the end of 1941, the German authorities established a tailor shop for 20 Jewish tailors, which took many orders and provided the Jews with a small income. At the end of July 1942, the Lutomiersk ghetto was liquidated, at which point the survivors were deported to the death camp in Chelmno. But Abraham Kurtz was fortunate to have avoided the fate of many of those born in his hometown. By the advent of the Second World War, he was living in North Carlton, Victoria, where he was employed as a leather worker. Kurtz had married, but had since become a widower. Abraham Kurtz enlisted in the militia on the 16th of February 1942. Taken on strength in mid-March, he was allotted to the 4th Employment Company of the Australian Army Labour Service. The Australian Army established 39 employment companies during the Second World War in order to ensure that the Australian Defence Forces had a large workforce dedicated to essential labouring tasks. These were essentially construction, maintenance and labour teams assembled and deployed to build, maintain and operate the infrastructure needed to support military operations in the Australian mainland. By war's end, there were about 15,000 men in such units. In them, 11 companies were in part or whole made up of non-British citizens. Road and remote facilities networks were rudimentary by modern standards, and in some cases non-existent at the outbreak of war. There were a large number of ports, railheads, supply dumps, transshipment and handling facilities, as well as roads, transit camps, and temporary accommodation that all had to be built, maintained, moved, and rebuilt through the war. On the 29th of January 1944, Kurtz was with a group of soldiers swimming in the Murray River at Newry Park in Albury. When Kurtz failed to return to the camp later that day, one of his companions notified police. Kurtz was unable to swim. His body was recovered from the water, and a court of inquiry later held at Albury Showgrounds found that he died from drowning, with no indication of misconduct or carelessness. Abraham Kurtz was buried at Albury War Cemetery. He was 34 years old. His name is listed on the roll of honour to my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Abraham Kurtz, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.